Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into something pretty massive.
I'm ready.
Awesome. So today, we're tackling the scientific revolution. And, you've sent in some really fascinating excerpts from Yuval Noah Harari's books. We've got Sapiens, Homo Deus, and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's clear you're interested in, the big picture stuff, how things connect.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to uncover how the scientific revolution wasn't just about, making cool new discoveries and inventions, but also how it fueled the rise of capitalism, empires, all these huge forces in history.
Yeah, what's so interesting about the sources you selected is how they look at the scientific revolution shaping not just how we understand the world, but also our relationship with power.
Right.
I mean, it's a period where curiosity, this basic human drive, becomes this tool for global dominance.
It's wild.
And we're still dealing with those implications today.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me in Harari's work was this idea of humans as ecological serial killers. And then we kind of leveled up, right?
Yeah.
To ecological mass murderers.
It's a powerful image, right?
It is.
It's meant to make you think. He argues that humans have always had an impact on their environments.
Sure.
But the scientific revolution, it amplified our ability to transform those ecosystems on a massive scale.
Yeah, think about what happened when, sheep, wheat, rats were introduced to Australia. Even the flu virus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it completely reshaped the landscape, right?
Yeah.
Wiped out countless native species.
And that's just one example.
It's scary. It really makes you wonder, can scientific progress, all this amazing advancement and ecological balance,
Right.
can those two things actually coexist?
And that's a question that we're still wrestling with.
Yeah.
Harari doesn't offer easy answers.
No.
But he does make us confront the potential downsides of our achievements. It's like we've been given this incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah.
But we're still figuring out how to use it responsibly.
Totally. And speaking of unsettling ideas, something else that really struck me was this concept of a useless class emerging because of AI.
Right. It really challenges how we think about the future of work.
For sure.
Harari suggests that as artificial intelligence gets more sophisticated, we run the risk that a whole part of the population won't be able to keep up
Right.
with the demands of a world driven by technology.
It's not just about losing jobs to robots, is it?
No, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's about the gap between those who have access to knowledge and resources and those who don't. Imagine trying to retrain a cashier who lost their job in, let's say, 2050 to automation.
Okay. Yeah.
Could they become a surgeon?
Right.
A software engineer? It makes you think, what does that future even look like?
Yeah. What responsibility do we have now to make sure everyone benefits from this progress?
Those are huge questions.
Yeah, they are.
And they force us to think beyond just the cool technical stuff about AI.
Right.
We have to consider the social and economic side, too.
Totally. Okay, now let's get to something that's both kind of exciting and a little bit creepy. What about algorithms and this idea of them hacking human emotions?
Oh, that's where science fiction and reality start to blur, right?
Yeah.
Harari argues that algorithms are getting so advanced, so sophisticated, that they might soon be able to actually manipulate our emotions with incredible precision. You know how Spotify or Netflix can kind of predict your mood, suggest what you might want to listen to or watch.
Yeah.
Now take that to the extreme. An AI DJ that knows exactly what song to play to make you feel even sadder or to instantly lift your spirits.
That's both cool and terrifying. I can't decide which one it is.
Right. And it makes you realize how little we really understand about the potential of these technologies.
Yeah.
And how they could be used to influence us in ways we don't even fully grasp.
Exactly. It's like, are we controlling them or are they starting to control us? And how do we make sure these tools are being used ethically, responsibly?
You hit the nail on the head.
That leads perfectly into one of Harari's most, I think, chilling predictions.
Yeah.
The rise of digital dictatorships.
Right. And that prediction gets to the core of how the scientific revolution shapes power. Harari says that biotechnology and information technology merging could give governments this incredible control over our thoughts and feelings, leading to totalitarian regimes unlike anything we've ever seen. He even points to the social credit system in China as a potential preview.
Which is unsettling, to say the least.
It is.
It makes you think, how do we protect individual freedom in a world where technology can be used to manipulate us in such powerful ways?
That's the million-dollar question right now.
Right.
We have to be aware of what's possible and start thinking critically about how we can shape the development and the use of these technologies.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about how scientific knowledge impacts the environment, work, our emotions. But I was also fascinated by Harari's analysis of stories.
Oh, yeah.
You know how humans have always relied on them to make sense of the world?
It's so essential to the human experience, isn't it?
It is. And Harari argues that throughout history, we've used all kinds of stories, religion, nationalism, political ideologies,
Right.
to organize our societies and to give our lives meaning.
And he compares religion to fake news
I know.
that people have been believing for centuries.
It's a bold statement,
Yeah.
but it makes you think about how these narratives, whether we believe them or not, shape us.
They do.
Our values, actions, and the power structures around us.
Our whole world is built on stories.
And, he makes another really interesting point, that the scientific revolution itself was fueled by a new story.
Okay, tell me more.
A story about human reason, about our ability to understand and control the natural world.
So science is based on a story, too.
It's fascinating. And that story, it became incredibly influential. It shaped not just scientific progress, but the rise of capitalism, empires.
Wow.
Our whole technological worldview. It reminds us that science doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's always connected to social, cultural, and political contexts.
And those contexts shape its development and its impact.
So we need to be aware of the stories that influence how we think about science.
Yeah.
And we need to be critical of those stories.
Exactly. We can't just accept scientific knowledge as this pure objective truth. We have to recognize the human side of it, the biases, the assumptions
Right.
that can shape research and how we interpret it.
Man, this is making my head spin a little bit.
I know, right?
But in a good way. It's like peeling back the layers of this onion, revealing all these hidden, complex parts of the scientific revolution.
And as we do that, we start to see how this wasn't just a moment in history.
Yeah.
It was this fundamental shift in how we relate to knowledge, power, to our place in the universe.
A shift that's still shaping us today. Okay, before we move on, there's one more big question from Harari I want to explore.
Okay, lay it on me.
What happens to human meaning and purpose in a world where AI is making more and more decisions for us, from what we buy to who we date?
It's a huge question that gets to the heart of what it means to be human in the 21st century. Imagine Anna Karenina asking the Facebook algorithm for relationship advice.
That's hilarious. It wouldn't be much of a novel, would it?
Not really.
But seriously, if algorithms are shaping our choices, what happens to free will,
Right.
responsibility,
Yeah.
happiness?
Harari argues that we need new ways to find meaning and purpose in a world where religion, nationalism, even human work are being disrupted by technology.
So what does that look like?
He suggests focusing on our inner lives, cultivating compassion, connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
It's not just about rejecting the old stories then.
Yeah.
It's about finding new ones that can guide us.
Exactly. And those new stories have to be grounded in an understanding of both the good and the bad that came from the scientific revolution.
Man, we've covered so much ground already. It feels like we're just scratching the surface. But I think this is a good place to pause.
I agree.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of the scientific revolution and what it means for the future of humanity.
I can't wait. So, picking up where we left off, it's interesting to think about how the scientific revolution didn't just happen on its own.
Right.
It was really intertwined with all these other big historical shifts.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, when you're looking at a tapestry,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just focus on one little thread.
Right.
You have to see how all the colors and textures come together to create the whole picture.
Exactly. And when we look at the scientific revolution in this bigger context,
Yeah.
we can see how it played a key role in the rise of European empires.
That's a good point.
Harari argues that science gave these empires a huge advantage,
Right.
not just in terms of, military technology,
Uh-huh.
but also in their ability to, manage and control these vast territories.
It's like science gave them the tools they needed to dominate the globe.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
think about the British Empire. Their ability to create and then maintain such a massive empire.
Right.
It was partly because of advances in things like navigation,
Yeah.
communication, transportation.
Absolutely.
And all of that was made possible by the scientific revolution.
Exactly. It allowed them to project power across the world in ways that no one had ever seen before.
Right.
And it's not just about the technology itself.
Okay.
Harari points out that both science and empires were driven by this similar mindset, this belief that human reason could be used to understand, classify, and ultimately control the natural world.
It's like this insatiable need to categorize everything.
Right.
Organize it.
Put it in boxes.
Impose order on all the chaos.
Yes. And that drive fueled both scientific exploration and imperial expansion.
That's such a fascinating parallel.
And the same mindset, it also extended to economics.
True.
You know, the scientific revolution played a big role in the rise of capitalism.
Oh, how so?
Well, by creating all these new opportunities for investment, innovation, economic growth, new discoveries led to new technologies, new industries, new markets.
Yeah.
It was a complete economic transformation.
It's like science provided all the ingredients.
Yeah.
And then capitalism figured out how to cook up this whole new system.
I love that analogy. And then this new system, it actually ended up providing the funding and incentives for even more scientific research.
Wow, so it was like this cycle.
It was a self-reinforcing cycle.
Yeah.
Science and capitalism were feeding off each other.
Yeah.
Driving this incredible pace of progress.
But I imagine there was downside to all this.
Of course.
Harari doesn't shy away from exploring the potential dangers of scientific knowledge.
Right. He makes the point that the same knowledge that has brought us so many good things can also be used for really harmful purposes.
Like the development of nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
I mean, the same science that allowed us to harness the power of the atom also gave us the ability to create these incredibly destructive weapons.
It's a reminder that knowledge is power.
Right.
But power can be used in so many different ways.
For good or for evil.
And sadly, throughout history, science has often been used to justify and support systems of oppression.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about how scientific theories were twisted to support things like slavery and colonialism.
That's true.
Or how they were used to create hierarchies based on race, gender, intelligence.
It's the dark side of science.
Yeah. It shows us that science isn't inherently neutral.
Right.
It can be used to empower or disempower, to liberate or to oppress.
It all depends on who is wielding that power and what their intentions are.
So we can't just celebrate the achievements of science.
Right.
We have to be aware of its potential for misuse.
Absolutely.
And actively work to make sure that it's used ethically and responsibly.
That brings up such a huge ethical question.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that science is used for good and not for evil?
It feels like such a complex landscape to navigate.
Yeah.
You know, where scientific knowledge can have both positive and negative consequences.
Right. Harari doesn't give us any easy answers.
No.
But he does emphasize the importance of developing what he calls a global ethics.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, he argues that we need an ethical framework that can guide our use of science in a way that benefits all of humanity, not just the interests of a select few.
That makes sense.
We need to think beyond national borders, beyond short-term gains, and really consider the long-term impact of our actions.
On the planet.
Yes.
On future generations.
Exactly.
It sounds like a tall order.
It is.
But it feels more urgent than ever.
Absolutely.
Especially as we're moving into this new era
right.
of artificial intelligence and biotechnology.
Where the consequences of our choices are amplified.
Yeah, exactly.
Along with developing this global ethics, Harari also really emphasizes critical thinking and open-mindedness. We can't just blindly accept everything that science tells us.
Right.
We have to question assumptions. Challenge authority.
Right.
Consider multiple perspectives.
We have to approach science with, you know, a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yes.
And humility.
And remember that scientists are human.
Right.
They have biases. They make mistakes.
And we need to be engaged citizens.
Absolutely.
Participating in the conversations about how science is used.
And what kind of future we want to create with it.
That's a great point. I think that's a key takeaway from Harari's work.
What is that?
That the scientific revolution isn't just a historical event.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process.
It's still happening.
And we are all participants in that process.
We're all part of it.
It's like we're all explorers venturing into this vast, uncharted territory.
Of scientific knowledge.
And we need to be both excited and cautious as we navigate this new landscape.
I love that analogy.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our dive,
I
wanted to touch on one more point that Harari brings up.
Okay.
This idea of the decline of belief in traditional sources of meaning.
That's fascinating.
It is. He suggests that as science has provided us with more and more explanations for the world, we become less reliant on
Yeah.
supernatural or metaphysical
Right.
explanations.
We don't need those old stories anymore.
Right. We've moved away from religion,
From tradition.
from explanations that rely on faith rather than evidence.
It's a shift in our thinking.
But that leaves a gap, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
If we don't believe in God anymore,
Right.
or in the nation, or in some grand narrative of history,
Yeah.
then what gives our lives meaning and purpose?
It's the big question.
It is.
And Harari offers some really interesting possibilities.
Like what?
Well, he suggests that we might find meaning in human connection,
Okay.
in the pursuit of knowledge,
Uh-huh.
in appreciating beauty and art.
I love that idea.
Yeah,
It's like the scientific revolution has opened up all these new possibilities,
it has.
not just in terms of scientific understanding,
Yeah.
but also in terms of our, spiritual and philosophical exploration.
And that exploration is really just beginning.
Yeah.
We're on the edge of this whole new era of scientific discovery.
Right.
And it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
With this knowledge.
It's not just about understanding the past.
Right.
It's about shaping the future.
And that's a responsibility that we all share.
Absolutely.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation,
It has.
and I'm excited to continue exploring in the next part.
Me too.
Before we move on, though,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you, our listeners.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the ethical implications of the scientific revolution?
How can we make sure that science is used for good and not for evil?
Share your thoughts with us on social media,
Yeah.
and join us for the final part of our deep dive.
Where we'll be exploring
Yeah.
Harari's insights on the future of humanity.
In a world shaped by science and technology. Welcome back to our deep dive on the scientific revolution. It's wild to think about how much ground we've covered already. From empires to algorithms, it seems like science has touched every aspect of our world.
Yeah, and it's not just about the discoveries themselves, right? It's this whole shift in how we view knowledge, power, even ourselves as humans.
And speaking of shifts, one of Harari's predictions that kind of stuck with me was this idea of digital dictatorships in the 21st century. It feels futuristic, but also, weirdly familiar somehow.
I know what you mean. It's a pretty chilling thought. He's suggesting that as technology gets more advanced, especially AI and biotechnology, governments and corporations could end up having this, unprecedented control over our lives.
Right. Imagine a world where every move you make, every thought you have is being tracked and manipulated by algorithms.
Yeah.
It sounds like a dystopian novel.
It does, right. And he brings up these real-world examples, like the social credit system in China, where your behavior is constantly scored, and that score affects everything you do.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these technologies aren't just hypothetical anymore. They're being implemented in ways that could have a huge impact on individual freedom. What if governments use algorithms to, censor information, spread propaganda, even manipulate elections?
Exactly. But Harari also says that technology itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a tool. It can be used for good or for bad.
So it's not about the technology itself, but who's controlling it.
Right. Will it be used to benefit everyone or just a select few? We need to be thinking about these questions right now and figuring out the ethical boundaries for how these technologies are developed and used.
So it comes back to ethics. How do we make sure these powerful tools are used responsibly?
That's where Harari's idea of a global ethics comes in. He says we need these new ethical principles to guide our use of technology. Principles that respect human dignity, promote social justice, protect the planet.
That's a huge challenge, but it feels absolutely necessary in our world, with everything so interconnected and technology-driven.
And it's not just about rules and regulations, right? It's about building this culture of responsibility, of being aware of the ethical implications of what we're doing.
So it's not just on scientists and policymakers, it's on all of us to think about these things.
Exactly. We need to be having open and honest conversations about the ethics of these technologies, and we need to include everyone in those conversations.
Everyone has a role to play in shaping the future. Scientists, policymakers, ethicists, everyday citizens. This isn't just some chapter in a history book. The scientific revolution is still happening, and we're all part of it.
That's such a powerful way to put it. Okay, before we wrap up, there's one last thought from Harari that I wanted to bring up. He says we should be investing just as much effort in understanding human consciousness as we are in developing artificial intelligence.
That's so interesting. It's like, if we're on the verge of creating machines that can think like humans, shouldn't we also be working on developing our own capacities for wisdom, compassion, and ethical decision-making?
It feels like we're at this really crucial point in human history, and the choices we make now are going to have a huge impact on the future.
The scientific revolution has given us so much power, but it's up to us to use that power wisely.
I agree. We need to balance our technological advancements with this deep understanding of what it means to be human.
This has been such an incredible deep dive, and I want to thank you for walking us through these really complex and challenging ideas. The scientific revolution has clearly changed the world and is going to keep shaping us for generations to come.
It's amazing to think about, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
As we move forward, let's remember to stay curious, to keep learning, and to work together to build a future that's both technologically advanced and ethically sound.
Beautifully said. It's been a pleasure exploring all of this with you and our listeners.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.